last year, I collaborated with the UN to visualize their annual emissions gap report, which, as you hopefully know, highlights the difference between what we need to do and what we're actually doing to prevent dangerous levels of climate change. One of the key points in the report was that to keep global warming below 2 degrees, greenhouse gas emissions will have to peak by 2020 and then decrease rapidly afterwards. But understanding that not every country has peaked, the ones in red, was not going to happen in just one chart, because the emissions of China, US, and India simply dwarf everyone else's. So to make that point, we transitioned that visualization so each country was a little square with their own little chart inside, arranged in a world map. So we can appreciate the regional patterns. Those countries that have yet to peak are the ones in red. But not everyone has the same responsibility, really. We've just said this. Some countries' emissions are much bigger, right? So here we transition the cells again to show each country's emissions and see the biggest contributors. You can barely see that. Probably in the next one you can see it more clearly. And then who is and who isn't on track to meet their commitments. Using storytelling, breaking apart a complicated data set, visualizing it and guiding people through it, is a very effective way of presenting information. But you can turn a presentation of actual abstract forms into something epic by connecting with that story at an emotional level. We can understand those squiggly lines and unevenly sized squares, but we cannot really connect with them. I've been lucky enough to have worked in some of the most groundbreaking newsrooms in the planet. The New York Times was my home for 6 years as it became the digital powerhouse that it is today. And most recently, I had the privilege to lead the visual desk at The Guardian for 2 years. But you may still not know who the heck I am, but you've probably seen this. And if you've not, I am very disappointed. I created this set of slides to sort of confess my sins as a data visualization professional. This was the first one, and it's a set of 12. I tried to completely obliterate the meme by just doing all the iterations that you could possibly think of. In this 20 years that I've been doing data-driven visual storytelling, I learned that to be a data reporter, and that interesting things only appear when we connect different data sets to bring the right context for interpretation. I learned to use visual analysis, and I understood that it was key sometimes to understand your data. And I learned that presenting it in a way that connects with whomever reads or accesses that information makes data visual stories more memorable, more helpful, and more actionable. That's what I do. I work to communicate data in a tangible way and in a relatable way. And my ultimate goal is to put data in terms that audiences can feel, weaving narrative and visual metaphors that reinforce the data. I come from a school of visual journalism in Spain that does things like this. This is by a Catalan visual journalist that worked in Argentina for a long time, and this was made in the 90s, and this was like completely groundbreaking for the way it thought of presenting data in a newspaper using metaphors. And it's funny how we sometimes associate this kind of visual, more metaphorical, more illustrative visualizations with Spain, when one of my all-time favorites is a piece that the New York Times did. It's like, this is visualization that has the power to move you. This, for some reason, it stuck with me, like forever. This is gun deaths by age group, and the colors mean homicide is gray, suicide is red, and accident is yellow or golden. And that, yeah, somebody says, wow, it's kind of, yeah. That's why it became, when I saw it and when I thought about it, and when I realized that it was not portraying that data in a gore way, there was something powerful about those are the killers, those bullets are the killers. You're not showing a silhouette of a person. You're showing that you're doing a metaphor. You're asking people to do a little bit of a jump before, and once that jump happens, it sticks with you. A year and a half ago, I collaborated with the Washington Post on a story debunking some of the arguments that gender pay deniers use, and the ones that they throw around every time the issue comes up. And as the hook for the story, which actually determined when we were going to publish it, we thought of when women started working for free. It's not something new. It's not an original idea. In 1975, in Iceland, women went on a strike at 2-something p.m., which was like the moment in the day where they would start working for free. So we did that, but for the whole year. And that means in the U.S., that metaphor of money as time applied to the U.S. fell around 80% of so the gender gap is 80%, the gap is 20. And in terms of a year, it's around October. That's when we published it. So we did that for every profession in the census, like when did women start working for free, and you could type your profession and see when you started to work for free. And there was a lot of, I am not going to explain too much of what we did in terms of data because it's very elementary for all of you. It wasn't for us what we tried to do, but I can sort of show you what my process is when I create this sort of data visual essays. It always starts with the data, and that leads you to an analysis and to structure things. But one of the key moments for me is when you get to the hook, to the connection that you want to the audience to remember. What do you want them to find memorable? What do you want them to recall when they go and tell somebody else about your story? And then the rest is pretty much those keys, the analysis and the finding the right hook, is what makes this sort of stories unique. The rest is pretty much how we all construct stories. We find a structure, we edit it, we design it, whatever. But finding the right analysis and finding the right hook, the right frame for this is the key. I recommend you guys take a look at it. It's pretty interesting. If you Google, can we talk about the gender pay gap, Washington Post, you'll find it. And I use, as well as metaphors, I use what I call emotional math. When I was at The Guardian, one of the recurring themes of, anybody from the UK here? Okay, you know how much, well, in Spain too, but how much home prices have raised. So we had access to every home purchase since 1995 in England and Wales, because that's how the Office for National Statistics in the UK works. England and Wales are a package. Scotland and Northern Ireland are something else. So we can do it for the whole UK. We could only do it for here. And the data by itself didn't reveal much. But we were doing some brainstorming. And I am very keen on shutting people up when somebody who is an introvert starts to talk. And this was one of those moments. One of the developers, a woman from Taiwan, said, "Well, what if?" And the moment she said, "What if?" I made everybody shut up. And she came up with the idea: what if we let people enter their income, and because banks don't give you a mortgage of more than 4 times your 4.5 your income, you could see if you can afford to live there or not. Because we had historical data, we could see when you could actually have purchased a home in that place you're looking at. We basically put it in terms that made it relevant for you. We showed you how unaffordable the country had become for you. And all of a sudden, the visualization was like personal. It was your personal story. It was your micro story in this. It put the data in very real, raw terms that affected you. And I try sometimes to come up with inventive interfaces to get my point across. In 2015, one of the biggest financial stories was how China's slowdown could weigh on the countries that depended on exporting to China. And we did a lot of number crunching. We found out that putting it in context with other data sets started to put data in terms that where patterns started to emerge. And one of the Carlos Zapponi, one of the developers in our team, put together this interactive prototype for the reporters to understand what was happening when, with that uncertainty of how much China's imports would go down, how much would it weigh on other countries. But when it came time to communicate that, we realized that letting the user drag China's imports down and on the phone is really, really neat, like letting them drag it down with their thumb. You could see how things came down at a different pace, how it weighed down the other countries at a different pace, and it brought data to life in a completely different way. And that was at the top, and the rest was like breaking down what those exports were about. And I also use sense of humor, when you can, to play even more with those metaphors. Humor, we know it's more memorable. Even when you put dark things through the humor filter, we tend to remember them more. I'm terrible at fixing things. I moved to Girona 2 years ago, and when we moved there, I spent, I think it was like an unbearable amount of time Googling how to fix things around the house. I'm a complete disappointment for my father-in-law. Not true, he loves me. But every time I need to fix something, he's like, really? So I pitched the story to Google Trends. And we did an interactive essay about the things people search how to do. And this is one of the elements, the one at the top. The size of each element corresponds to the search volume. And I don't know if let me go back and then play it again, because somebody from Russia here? No Russians? Somebody from Eastern Europe? Because the pattern is similar. What's up with fixing you fix your washing machine? Like you Google how to fix your washing machine? That was incredible. And that was one of the things that that immediately when people were using it, they were commenting on like, wait, what? People use like search how to fix their washing machine? Sorry, that slide, I don't know what it was doing there. And to wrap that up, for the 2018 World Environment Day, the UN, with whom I collaborate a lot, their theme was beating plastic pollution. And I worked with them to create an interactive and visual story that summarized the UN plastic pollution report. And as the opener, we showed the geometric growth of plastic waste since the 1950s in the form of this visual of raining trash. We basically transformed the data in that small chart there from an expert in plastic pollution, Jenna Jembeck, into this visual of raining trash. The rate of falling trash changes based on the data in that decade. And as I was working on it, my then 4-year-old, now 5, walked into the room and said, like, Dad, why is it raining more and more trash? He couldn't read. And he didn't have the tools to understand what was happening. He didn't have the context. But he could read what was happening. Because we respond much more immediately when things are presented to us in this like raw terms. When we guide immediately people through lots of nuance and details. We can do it later. We can do it after we engage them, after we connect with them. We engage our system system 1 first, and then we engage our system 2. Because it's not about the data, the abstraction of it, but about the people. Another moment with my 4-year-old. I've used this slide before, and when I was working on it and putting this bar charts or histogram and the people together, he tends to walk in while I'm working and ask me, what am I doing? Daddy, are you doing a graphic? So I ask him, like, what is more important, this or this? And he was like, duh, this one. Like, why? It was like, because it's people. And taking all that, making data about people and hook you emotionally, and weaving a narrative to explain the nuance is what we try to do also for the UN for the 2017 Environment Assembly. We start counting the number of people that were dying because of an unhealthy environment and climate change the moment you open the interactive. And someone in Western Pacific is going to die in 3, 2, 1. And we call to action later. How do we stop that? To show you the details and the nuance of this and the reasons and more data. But we hook you first emotionally. And this is a project we did here with Karma Beiro, who's in the audience, about gender violence, violence against women in Catalonia. And one of the things that we realized when we were working on this was that we always talk about percentages of women that suffer gender violence. We never, and it's a percentage, so it's a number that goes from 0 to 100. But we don't really grasp the size of the issue because we've never looked at it in terms like this. The first thing that we wanted to do was make audiences really feel the sheer number of women that go through this every year. This is not like sins, whatever, this is every year. So you're not going to get to any content until you're done scrolling through 75,000 women who suffer violence against women every year. We timed it, so we designed it and timed it so it was quick enough for people to actually reach the content, but painful enough to get you to scroll through those 75,000 little women. And it made sense. It got a reaction from people. The first thing you find in that documentary is web documentary is putting this data in more raw terms, and that is because, and it's a more putting it in this more simpler terms, in this more storytelling terms. It just made sense for me since the very beginning, and it seems like it has worked so far. And when I was at the New York Times, we started to adopt this kind of storytelling techniques to do data journalism, data visualization. It's because we listen and tell stories from a very young age, and it's a very human tool for understanding. It's perhaps the most human tool for cognition, storytelling. It's our way to understand the world around us. And if we pair it with this data-driven and evidence-based sort of approach, I think it can move our audiences to act on issues. Thank you very much.
So when you scroll down these women to eventually read the article, how do you know what is quick enough, or but also painful enough? Do you do any kind of?
You test it with enough people around you, and you also go by gut feeling. We're not. It's heuristics. It's a shortcut. We didn't run any sort of tests to see what was the optimal time to do it. We just felt like, and also depends on your speed doing it. We felt like around 7 seconds was enough to get you mad enough.
Thank you so much for a very powerful presentation, I should say.
Thank you.
Yeah, and really impressive visualizations. Yeah, my question is, what tools do you use to create these visualizations?
Depends. So if you think about that like super fast process that I showed at the beginning, very fast video, I do data analysis I do data presentation. For the data analysis, I use most of the times R, the statistical language, and if that's not enough or I don't remember how to do it in R, I build little programs in JavaScript, in Node, and if not, and for the if it's very simple, you can do it in Google Spreadsheets though. And for the presentation, I use D3 mostly for visualization purposes.
Hi, yeah, and thanks again. The speech was really great. I was just wondering, when you are pitching a story directly to a publisher of some kind, so the Google Trends example that you gave, do you go through the entire end-to-end process by yourself, or do you collaborate with others? So on the design side, for example, is it completely...
It depends on the Google Trends story, and this is in the context of a larger project that they're doing. They've contacted a bunch of visual designers to come up with stories around data, around their data, and see what things of interest we can find. They had contacted me a while ago, but I was at The Guardian, so I didn't really have time to do it. So when I was no longer at The Guardian, I said, hey, so I thought about this. What do you guys think about it? And I worked with the editor of Google Trends, the director of Google Trends. I don't know what's exactly his title. Simon Rogers. He used to be at the Guardian. And I worked with an analyst in his team, and I also worked with Alberto Cairo, who's been art directing some of these things. But in this case, I just did it by myself. But some of the things that we did at the Guardian. So at the Guardian, we had a really big group, and we were lucky enough to have, I think it was like 7, 8-ish developers. 4 of them were also really talented designers, and 2 of them were data scientists. And that team would, when we came up with a story, or when a story came to us, would collaborate with more traditional reporters and with more traditional designers to come up with these stories. I was just there to edit them and clear obstacles for them and be the bouncing board for their ideas.